Using budgets, part 2. Looking more at management decision making from budgets. Okay, we're going to recap what we did in the first tutorial on budgets, and we're going to look at what a budget is. So you should know by now that a budget is an agreed plan establishing the expected revenue and expenditure of an organisation. So again, planning what we expect to spend and what we expect to receive. Now what we're going to do here is take this a bit further now and look at what is good budgeting for a management position. So obviously a good budget takes into account the aims of the organisation, and it will also then canvass as many different opinions as possible from people within the organisation. So you want to tap into those different levels of expertise to ensure that your budgets are going to be accurate. You want these to be the real deal so that you make no mistakes. And lastly, you need to make sure your budgets are challenging but realistic. So you need to follow that SMART acronym. So look at our aims and objectives presentation if you're a bit unsure on what we mean by SMART objectives. So we need to make sure these are challenging but realistic objectives that people in the organisation can actually achieve. So the best way to look at this is to look at what we do with management budgeting, and one of those things is what's called variance analysis, and you need to be able to do this in business. And this is the process where you compare the actual figures to those which you actually did a budget for. So we're looking at what we really did do compared to what we planned to do. And because of that, we have two different types of what they call variance. We have this thing called adverse variance and favourable variance. So let's take a look in more detail at what they are, and then we'll look at an example. So an adverse variance is one where the business does a lot worse than expected, or just even does worse than expected. £1 is worse than expected. So this is when you do worse than what you planned to do. So in simple terms, this actually means that actual costs would have been higher than you budgeted for, so you actually spent more money than you anticipated. So you're looking at your actual figure and you think, yeah, okay, we have spent more. Or it could be the other way around. You could see that revenue is actually lower than you planned for. Again, that's quite a bad situation for a business, because you actually plan to receive more than what you got in. You may have to make some sort of decision to adapt in the future, or may need to take out some form of borrowing, maybe from the bank and an overdraft as a result. Let's look at the more positive side. A favourable variance is one where the business has done better than you expected. So you're looking at whether they outperform their budget. This typically will be one where costs were lower than you budgeted for, so you're looking at your costs being lower. Or it could be one where your revenue is much higher than you predicted. Again, so you're getting more money in than you planned for. Again, more positive side of this. This means that you can look to spend your money in different ways. So how does this all get translated into an exam question or into budgeting in general? Let's look at a budget. There is a budget. You can see I've got on my left hand side the budget, and on the right hand side I've got the actual, and I've done my revenue, my expenditure and my profit. What I'd like you to do now is look at the screen and see if you can work out whether it's adverse or favourable for each of the different sections. So adverse or favourable for revenue, adverse or favourable for expenditure, and adverse or favourable for profit. And just put an A or an F in this column here, or on your piece of paper in front of you. So see if you can work it out. Was it worse or better than expected? That's what you're looking for, remember. Budgeted, actual. Worse or better than expected. Hopefully, if I give you a few minutes now, you can work that out pretty quickly. Worse or better than expected. Let's take a look at the answers. That's what you should have got. So on this one here, hopefully you spotted straight away that the revenue was worse than expected. They planned 1.4, they only got in 1.3. Worse than expected. Adverse. However, on the expenditure budget, they planned to spend 0.9 million, but they only spent 0.7 million. So they did better than expected. They spent less money. That's better. And down here, they planned to make a profit of 0.5 million, but they actually made 0.6. So that's a favourable variance again. Hopefully you got them right. If you didn't, have a look back over it and see why. Okay, that's it. You should now be able to calculate budget variances and assess how different budgets can be used to make business decisions. If you're a bit confused, look back at part 1 that I produced for you and see if you can work out what a budget is, and obviously the different implications of budgeting and how it can be used in business. And don't forget to follow me on my YouTube or Twitter channel, and check out my brand new website, businessbee.co.uk.